It's January 11th, 2022. It's today. It's really, really cold. It hit an Arctic temperature, or we had an Arctic blast of some sort. Is what they described. And so I didn't go for the evening walk, but I did find on NTD I had watched some movie from 2016 earlier. I've kind of been trying to flip around subject matter, but I found a Dr. Robert Malone, inventor of mRNA vaccine technology, on a station called NTD. And I find him rather interesting in the way he linguistically builds construct. And even for a novice like myself, if I listen with keen enough ear, I can follow along with some of the way he builds intellectually. I find him interesting. But again, like everything with me, it's short bursts. He talks about something called mass formation, something about hypnosis by this television, not himself necessarily, although inside of the skew, I guess he would qualify, perhaps. Depends on the data set that was laid out before, and however it was set up. But then he's an intellect that I'm watching from like my windows to the world through this quantum teleportation device that he's coming through in. And I just find him at a different level of intellect from which I've been exposed to, even with Lewis, like hunting and pecking for whatever, spirituality or spiritual advisor of some sort. So I just find him very interesting. I'm just going to play. I taped it so this way I could rewind it and replay it because I found him that fascinating.
We've seen it again and again. So the media drives this focus, and a fraction of the population, and it's typically about 30% is all, of the population becomes obsessively focused on a single point, exactly akin to what would happen during the process of hypnosis. With hypnosis,
But the media finds it and presents it. I'm just a spectator receiving the message from the teleportation device and the governance or the people involved in trying to push the message.
says you can focus the human mind on a single topic and exclude all other signals in the environment, so that a surgeon can do a surgery on a patient who perhaps is allergic to an anesthetic agent that they might otherwise use. This is used clinically. This isn't just, stuff that carnival tricksters use. Hypnosis is a real thing, and it is used clinically. And it involves focusing the human mind on a single point to the extent that it will exclude all other data and signals. And that is what happens, what triggers mass formation. It typically happens when it gets triggered in about 30% of the population. And again and again and again, a leader will either incite that triggering or will gain control of it so that they are perceived as the solution for the anguish and pain, psychological pain, that the people had been experiencing. Okay, so a leader is identified by the mass once they've formed, as offering the solution. Furthermore, by forming this mass from these people that had previously been totally disassociated in society, decoupled, had no friends, suddenly they have all found a common bond. So they have relief from their psychological anxiety and stress. This free-floating anxiety is relieved. They now have the metaphorical tiger or bear or mountain lion that their brains can focus on. Whereas
Those three references I'm unfamiliar with. I don't understand where that comes from, and that's what I mean. Like, he's such a high level of intellect that I try to follow along as best I can, but I'm able to discern where I am deficient and he is far superior in intellect and knowledge for the content for which he's speaking on.
previously their brains had all this internal cognitive dissonance, but they didn't know what to focus on. Now suddenly they have a thing that they can focus on. And when that happens and you have a leader emerge that is accepted as the savior for that mass that is formed around this hypnotic event, that leader can do no harm. That mass, as we saw with Stalin, will first consume those that are perceived or identified by the leader as the other, the threat. And we see this in the modern context, in the current context, by the anti-vaxxers or the non-vaccinated. Those are identified as the threat outside of the mass. Whether or not the data support that is irrelevant. They are perceived as the other. And during mass formation historically, in human populations, people will eliminate that threat. The mass will act to eliminate the threat. And deplatforming is actually a very benign version of that response. It typically results, in the case of Stalin, as one example, or Hitler, of course, is the notable example that we are all very attuned to, with the concentration camps. Stalin, it was the gulags. What happens with mass formation?
I don't have, again, on those two topics, the same level of education that this man has. I've heard people in passing, it's really hard to hold on to the facts that are pertinent and important because most of the stuff that I've received is only from a one-sided point of view and more the way that the rail car wants someone to arrive at the same conclusion of, which I haven't examined all the facts. So for me, it's really hard to grapple and anchor myself into a position without having a full set of data or a full story, like a symposium or a construct, the correct construct in order to analyze the data, not just a portion of it based on some sponsorship that wants to forcefully take over a population is really where it feels like at the moment, is that they build it so high on one side that it's just, they feel like they've made almost a hurdle and they can just jump straight over. And I'm not necessarily speaking on Dr. Robert Malone, that's just a side thought, just a bigger construct that I've been mentioning while on my struggle in order to find my place and how to survive day to day, the medical issues that I'm going through, but also for employment and for societal inlet in order to figure out how this last 4 decades built itself, because it is really confusing being this forced out and almost canceled in humanity. It's perplexing.
In the French Revolution, another great example, it's the guillotine, right? The group that was identified as causing the pain for the French people were the aristocrats. And so the guillotine. Here's the thing. As the mass formation deepens, those that are part of that group will eliminate by any means those that are identified as their enemies, as the cause of the inciting event that they're focused on, responsible for that event, responsible for the spread of SARS-CoV-2 in the population. All this messaging we're hearing from the White House.
I don't know what that
is. The unvaccinated that are the cause. Okay, what that is deepening the mass formation of this group that has become totally hypnotized. It's classic. And I asked Matthias, okay, doctor, what's the prescription?
He's mentioning a doctor. I missed the first half. It didn't. Usually it goes in the reverse to where I began. And the tapes, Matthias, and I don't know the other name, he's a doctor from Belgium. They refer to their scholarly as doctors, apparently. Again, I don't have access to PhD level anything, but they use the title doctor. It appears on some of the higher thought process career levels as well.
What's the therapy here? And he said the only thing yet to be determined is how deep the mass formation goes, how intimately people get wrapped up around this logic. It's a stretch to call it logic. It is completely resistant to facts. Facts are irrelevant. If facts are inconsistent with the storyline that the mass has formed around, those facts will be rejected. This is another fundamental thing about human psychology, is it can be clearly demonstrated that there are data which come in through your senses. And what happens is your brain processes those data.
I love the way he explains this.
This is, fundamental signals coming through your eyes or your ears or touch. Those data aren't directly perceived. They are compared against a model cognitively in humans.
It's a model that is within cosmology and astrology and within the environment of the invisible spectrum that you were built with, and then it's where you arrive in a moment and where the dissonance or the separation between where the soul and the spirit should be within universal action and where it is currently out of alignment. In my case, it's out of alignment. In others, they're perfectly in tune like beautiful instruments. So I love the way that he explains it. And for him to hit that home run for me, even though I feel like I have a wiffle ball and it's not going to go very far. I don't need it to go far as long as it gets to the correct level of I'm in danger at some level. I don't know why. I don't know who. I don't know how. I don't know how it was built up this way. And I don't know how to protect myself or survive or to get out of it alive. That's where I'm at.
And those data which are inconsistent with that model will be rejected. We are only able to perceive that which is consistent with our own intellectual model of reality. It can be demonstrated again and again. This is a core part of hypnosis. So these people that are caught up in the mass formation, it doesn't matter how much data you throw at them. They will reject it. And we see this in real time. This is what deplatforming is all about. The mass is formed around the idea that the vaccines are magically going to be able to relieve them of this problem, which is infection by SARS-CoV-2 and the threat that it represents. And so Anything,
And again, my level of human does not get that level of information on the television. They don't in New York, they don't pronounce it SAR level 2 COVID, whatever he's speaking on. It's not what my level of human or what the New Yorkers are being told through television service. And mostly the rabbit ears, because I try to stay out of the upper level programs based on FCC and broadcasting that I was born within a certain level of protection. And they've gone from analog with reception antenna into digital, like ether of minutia, which is very scary because it feels like it's they deplatformed it somehow, and now it's grasping at pieces of safety and security to wrap oneself in a veil or a shroud of protection.
anything that is perceived as leading to individuals making a reasoned choice that they do not want to accept this vaccine personally is deemed to be mis or disinformation by its very nature, because it would alter their behavior and they wouldn't take vaccine. If you think this through, what that means is that the information that a given individual, you, your audience members, that they would require in order to have informed consent, true informed consent, it is not allowed. They cannot have access to that information that might lead them to make any decision other than the decision that the mass wishes them to make. Because the mass is formed around the concept in this situation that the vaccines are a perfect solution to their problem, their cognitive angst, which is the existential threat of death from this virus. And by the way, they've defined, if you are against mandates, you are an anti-vaxxer. That's now in Webster's. The definition of the term anti-vaxxer includes anybody who is opposed to mandated administration of an experimental medical product, which is exactly contrary
He's at the end.
to the Nuremberg trial outcomes and the Helsinki Accord, which say that you absolutely can't do that. You cannot mandate that somebody accept an experimental medical product without full informed consent and willing acceptance of the risk. The criteria are abundantly not being met. We have governments asserting that it's okay to go in and vaccinate children without their parents' consent. We have policy positions that if your child goes to school, you are by definition consenting that your child will be vaccinated at that school. The whole thing for me, when people ask, why are you speaking out, Robert? It is profoundly shocking, antithetical to everything I've ever been taught in terms of bioethics. And one of the things as a clinical researcher is that you're subjected to bioethics training rigorously, repeatedly. It is one of the criteria. If you want to be a principal investigator at a clinical research trial, it was a core part of the Harvard program that I went to. Bioethics training, bioethics.
I wish I knew about these career fields early on.
And we have completely disregarded. Aaron Kheriaty was drummed out, that the lead bioethicist for the University of California, Irvine, as I recall, was drummed out of the university because he wouldn't take the jab, because it was being mandated, an illegal mandate of the jab, of the vaccine, by the University of California. And they booted him out of the University of California, their lead bioethicist, who was taking a firm stand that was consistent with modern bioethics. That it goes on and on.
So many thoughts I have right now. Okay, one is, this is could be a dangerous time in our history that we're entering.
This is my unity flag that I'm aware of.
There is this realization as I mentioned earlier, that many people are simply not cognizant of their headspace, and that there's a kind of a, I don't know, there's a compassionate element to this. It can help many of us that are not in this, think about others in a much more peaceful way, perhaps. The third thing is, I learned many years ago that I'm not susceptible to being hypnotized, and apparently there's a small portion of the population that's like that, because I watched it happen, being done in public in a situation where I knew it was real, because I always thought it was, basically parlor tricks, I think, as you said, and no, so it's a very real thing. It's used clinically, yet there's some portion of the population that just simply it just doesn't work on.
Coming up next.
Star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. I'm unclear how to find out if you are susceptible to hypnosis or not. I'm sure it's somewhere in a data record who's wired for it, hardwired, softwired, whatever, and who's not, in like whatever area handles that, I don't even know. Star 1978, star 8378, Nicole Cattaruzza. It's Bayside Station, Bayside, New York, 11361. And I'm at Earth, Solar System, Milky Way, Universe, Galaxy is broken. Galaxy for me is broken through some form of spiritual derailment and just desynchronization. It's January 11th and it's 2022.